Well, friends, here we are, nearly at the end of Lent. For 4 weeks now, we've gathered to find the quiet center and find the frame where we are freed. We've explored together the idea of finding more in less. We've had to reframe this season. Instead of removing something from our lives, self-denial, we choose to take actions that help us be more fully ourselves. We've considered how saying yes, like Richard Wagamese, and no, like Jesus, can help us do this. We've looked at Jesus's anger in the temple and practiced the rain skill of how to accept and learn from our own anger, recognize, allow, investigate, nurture. Last week, another facet of the kingdom of God was turned to the light, one that requires the presence and contributions of us all, regardless of ability or disability. And for this last Sunday of Lent, Kevin and I thought we would follow Ian's suggestion and look into the rearview mirror before we head into Palm Sunday and Passion Week. To drop world weariness and turn our gaze to miracle. And when we say miracle, we don't mean the rise from the dead sort of miracle. That's for another week. And when we say miracle, we don't mean toxic optimism that refuses to see anything but the bright side. We don't mean to add to the burgeoning genre of pandemic resilience on the radio and social media, which was beginning to nauseate both my son Simon and I. It feels a bit like an attack when you yourself are in a deep struggle. We mean the sort of miracle that Ian describes in his poem, the regular, everyday garden variety. And here's your heads up. In a few minutes, Kevin and I will invite you all to name your own experiences of this kind of miracle. So start to look back over your morning, or this past week, or this Lent, or these pandemic times to see what miracle, or maybe even two, you can glimpse. And if you're like me, you're looking for some assistance in this, instructions. It strikes me that Ian, the psalmist, and Richard Wagamese are teaching a skill here, a life skill, one that takes practice. The psalmist shows us that this skill can be put to use in the depths of what sounds a lot like depression, like anger and outrage. When all the accusations have been hurled, the psalmist decides to remember Elohim's wonders of old, to ponder God, whose way is holy, the Elohim who works wonders. And like the old woman teaches Richard Wagamese, after you've learned how to make your own moccasins with the hide of your experience and the needle of your intention to lead a spiritual life, you suddenly notice Creator is in the stitches. And Ian suggests this skill has something to do with dropping world weariness and cynicism and remembering to look into the rearview mirror of your day. It has something to do with the act of climbing into your shining loan of hours, and with casting spells of grace, and with expecting to glimpse a miracle. Now, like the miracle Ian describes in the poem, it might make little sense to the rest of us. The confluence of grackle, peony, running grandchild was miraculous to Ian, struck him, caused something to open to change inside of him, something related to wonder, to surprise, to meaning, to joy, something a bit like realization, but deeper. This is the kind of miracle that is especially for you, having been placed in the flow of your regular everyday life, like a gift. So can I hope, no expect to see them there? Can I learn this skill of glimpsing miracle? Or in the words of Mary Oliver the other week, the skill of looking as if standing with your arms open. Might we begin to see how much is actually holy around us, like the song Keith sang. So let's practice. I'll share a couple of mine. They fall more into the Richard Wagame's God in the Stitches kind than in the Soughton sort that reveal themselves in a rearview mirror. Miracle number 1. At the beginning of the pandemic, when the stores ran out of yeast, like many others, I decided I would try to make sourdough bread. I have made bread for years, carefully measuring teaspoonfuls of granulated yeast into warm water. But sourdough bread asks you to believe there is yeast wafting about in the air all around you, which sounded a bit to me woo-woo. This recipe asks you to believe that yeast can be harvested from the air if you leave food for it on the counter for 5 days. I remember being incredulous at the instructions in the recipe. 50 grams of the sticky paste of flour and water that somehow now magically contains Thunder Bay air yeast is supposed to raise 1,000 grams of flour and 680 grams of water, as if. And I remember coming back into the kitchen at the end of that day and the shock of seeing the giant mound of dough slow motion exploding out of my biggest mixing bowl, and feeling the miracle of that settle into my body. This feeling of discovering a secret, that something I had purchased for years and no longer could, was actually floating all around me. Miracle number 2. As some of you know, I am a birder. Spring and fall migration seasons bring new species to northwestern Ontario and to our backyard every day. But winter is quiet. Long months of looking, but other than chickadees, starlings, crows, sparrows, not finding. In winter, I miss the migration gifts of discovery and surprise and learning. This January, Kevin and I cross-country skied up to the Thunder Bay Lookout in Sleeping Giant Provincial Park. Other than hearing a distant raven, we hadn't seen a bird all day. Then, while stopped for lunch, we heard a woodpecker drumming nearby. Likely it was the commonly seen downy or hairy, but in winter you take what you can get. So I squinted up into the pine to see which it was and whether it was male or female, you know, the usual. To my surprise, it was small, but it had a solid black back. What? I grabbed my binoculars and Kevin took pictures as we called field marks out to each other while it hacked away at the pine branch just above our heads. We looked it up when we got back home. A black-backed woodpecker. How aptly named. The book said, a denizen of the deep boreal forest. Sightings are rare. It was beautiful. It feels like a miracle that we were in the same part of the giant boreal forest at the same time as a creature so usually hidden. And now it's your turn. Have you, like Ian, learned any tricks about how to see the small miracles of everyday life? Let's name some, even though they might not make sense to anyone else. I told mine in stories, but I could have just said sourdough bread and black-backed woodpeckers. So feel free to tell the story, or like Ian, just name it.
Rachel, I've got a mirror here, a literal rear view mirror that's on my helmet. And the miracle is it's not sold by any bike store in Toronto. You have to call this guy named Mateo and go to his house or wait till he shows up to yours. But I did that, and I'm learning to look with one eye and see such amazing things coming from behind. Really loving that, and the idea that a rear view mirror was one of the miracles. Woo!
I think to feel that sense of miracle, for me, it's often some moment of surprise, even if it's not a huge surprise, it's something that jolts me out of wherever my head is in a moment. And, you know, probably then also draws a connection. This morning, you know, just because I knew I was going to be playing Holy Now, you know, I had stuff like that in my head. And as I went for a walk before the coffee shop opened, I walked through Corktown Common, and the red-winged blackbirds were shouting their heads off all over the marsh. And you know, pulled a whole lot of things together this morning. It was just a lovely moment seeing them crashing about and screaming about how great they were, jumping from rush to rush.
I've got a birder story that is miraculous. I think Rachel knows about it. My dear friend, Alan King, and I were sitting in the garden while Haida was in the hospital, very ill. And we heard this strange skirling sound. And I, in great confidence, said, "Oh, that's only a black squirrel scolding us." And Alan said to me, well, no black squirrel can whoosh through the air like that and land at the bottom of the next door apple tree and peck at it as if it was trying to bring it to its knees. And I looked, and sure enough to Alan, but not to me, it was a spectacular sight, the affiliated woodpecker, bold as brass and sensational as always. That was miraculous because my friend Alan knew something I didn't, and that was the sound of a pileated woodpecker.
I think Jim Houston had a drawing he was trying to share there. Maybe Dave, you could spotlight him.
We on the 15th of March, we always go for a drive. And one of the things that I want to do on that day is to see if I can see a robin. Well, we saw robins, too many to count, but we finally saw red-winged blackbirds, and red-winged blackbirds are the sign of spring for me, but I can't just hear them or see their shape in a tree. I have to actually see them. And coming along Lake Erie, these two posed for us. We stopped the car, we took pictures, and we watched them for 3 or 4 minutes. It was really quite wonderful. And that thing last year, I didn't see a red-winged blackbird until the end of June. I knew they were there, but I didn't see one. But this was on the 15th, and that was great. Very positive because, you know, for like so many people, a lot of things have been dark. One other quick thing, though, that hearing other people's. I have grandchildren who know everything and think I know nothing, and they're usually right, and are fairly, like, they're not, they don't come to church, they don't want to talk about that stuff. But when I sent them out text yesterday, asking if they wanted me to bring them kits to make Easter gardens, I got a response faster than I could type saying, yes, I love making those. And that for me was a delight.
We live on the 21st floor with windows facing lots of directions, but in the morning, I get to watch the sunrise every day.
Beautiful.
Yesterday, I was at a birthday party. Outdoors, 6 women sitting outdoors celebrating the 87th birthday, and none of us has had COVID. Some of us have been tested. It was miraculous.
I go for a walk every day, and the miracle that happens very, very often, actually, which is part of its beauty, is that I start a conversation with some little one in a stroller or barely walking. And, in these pandemic times of not a lot of conversations, it's really, for me, it's really miraculous, these conversations that I have with these little ones who are walking in a different direction or the same direction as I am, but just having a conversation with them at their level is really a beautiful thing.
I have 2 miracles. One was just consciousness and a real gratitude for the miracle of tons of snow this past winter, which meant that even in Guelph, Ian and I were able to get out 4 or 5 times a week cross-country skiing in this area, just 20 minutes from our house, which was groomed and track set. And there were days where it just felt like the snow was like manna covering the fields. It was just the concept of snow was so miraculous to me. And the miracle of Zoom, my friend Abby Polonetsky is with us this morning from her long-term care home in Ottawa. It says Janet Cooper, but it's really Abby. And we were able to visit by Zoom a couple of weeks ago. And the fact that she's able to be here at Holy Trinity with us this morning virtually, that's a miracle I'm thankful for.
And my miracle is also a winter miracle. The river froze a few weeks ago in the deepest cold of February. And for about 10 days, we were able to walk up our local river covered in snow and places bare. And you could see the stumps through the ice and the bubbles flowing past and the bottom of the river. It was just the most beautiful thing, standing on top of moving water and seeing it all slip past. So I found that miraculous.
And the miracle of not falling through.
And the miracle of not falling through, yes.
Miracle of Ian walking on water.
Yes.
I have 2 miracles to share. One I shared with all of you a previous Sunday, the time that I pulled my grown kids together to tell them all about the plans I had made for Tobias for after I'm gone. And the miracle that the other 3 kids all said they would really like to have Tobias live with them. All 3 of them wanted to take turns having Tobias live with them someday. And I hadn't even thought that that was a possibility. So that's the first miracle. And the second one, I don't know if any of you have had one of these kinds of anxious nights, but we had our
office manager quit suddenly at the inner city family health team, and I'm terrible with finances, and all of a sudden it landed on my lap. And so, pulling in an accountant and trying to sort it all, the mess out. And on Thursday night, I was up all night worrying. And I tried everything. I tried reading, I tried getting up, walking around. And finally, I just lay there and said, God, can you be with me? And I just lay there the rest of the night with that mantra, just God be with me. And the next morning, I got up and went to work, and I wasn't tired all day. And things started working out. And I thought, wow, what a lesson. And I think those two miracles are connected. And thanks for hearing my two many miracles.
Some wonderful conversation going on in the chat as well about the blessings of grass and of Emma's.
I have a mini miracle of a different sort. My brother is 94 years old and still lives on his own with the help of his daughter. And I've heard that you could get a cutout of a blue, to put yourself in the stands at a Blue Jay game this summer, one of those big cardboard cutouts. I tried to make it work. Couldn't. Asked my niece, couldn't do it. Finally, I asked my great niece, who within 5 minutes managed to get the picture submitted, and I got a confirmation that my brother is going to be sitting at the Blue Jay games in Dunedin, Florida all season. It's a miracle.
Grandchildren that are the miracle.
You got my comment, Mary Lee?
Sorry,
I
I've
put it in the chat about
Yeah.
the little gardens, how wonderful they were, how much I loved them.
Oh, I'm glad. No, I didn't get it.
I remember the kids in the altar with them, with you, very well. They were really wonderful.
When Beth called to ask me about instructions, I said, why don't you just tell people to ask their kids? Because most of the young adults who grew up at any point during Holy Trinity did make Easter gardens. And I kept doing them here at home by myself, even after all the kids and grandchildren thought they were too old to bother, because I love watching things grow.
How nice.
Vaccination on a mass scale is pretty much a miracle. That it works in spite of horrible mismanagement from every side. Thanks be to God.
God be with us, Alan.
What I might do is take a moment. I think we'll have time probably afterwards in what we call the coffee time or coffee and tea time to share more stories. I hope we do.